I guarantee that you've seen ads for these indestructible shoes with the promise of the all-in-one solution to work shoes that provide a perfect blend of comfort, style, and protection. And tons of demonstrations of kicking nails, hitting the toe with sledgehammers, running over with shoes, even grinders on the toe. So are these really the next evolution in work footwear, or is it just cheap Chinese junk being sold to the people that need to rely on their footwear the most? We're gonna figure that out by cutting them in half, run through our test, and not just our test, but we're gonna test every single one of their claims that they have on their website to find out the truth of these indestructible shoes. So what are these shoes? The brand is Indestructible Shoes. The style is the Rider. They weigh 1 pound, 2 ounces. They retail for an advertised $160, but they've never once ever been sold for over $100. They're usually around $74 like these ones were. Bet you couldn't guess it, they're made in China. And the way they position this product is, thanks to the advancements we've made in footwear technology, we have designed the perfect pair of shoes that provide long-lasting protection without additional weight. These shoes are built with military-grade material, an incredibly tough yet lightweight material, clearly written in Chinese as well. These are the African Troopers. We designed these with Jim Green as a collaboration because there's basically no true heritage barefoot style boots out there. And so over the last 7 or 8 months, I've been working with Jim Green to make exactly that. And we've gone through like 15 or 16 different prototypes and lots of testing to get this boot dialed in, and I think we did it. So this barefoot African Trooper is an attempt to combine American boot making style with South African construction, inspired by the coolest boot in history, the paratrooper boot of World War II. These boots have a full leather upper that's 2.3 millimeters thick, a full length veg tan leather insole, a true double layer toe cap, a fully gusseted tongue, all while still maintaining the best attributes of barefoot style shoes with the zero drop, the super wide comfy toe box for wiggle room with your toes, the flexibility, and they're surprisingly light. And these drop on June 27th. They come in the fudge, Houston brown, and Houston black, limited quantities. And if you want early access before the public to make sure you get a pair and to make sure you're the first of the line so you get them sooner, be sure to sign up for the limited edition email list below. And just like the African Rangers, for every 10 pairs sold, Jim Green donates 1 pair to true African Rangers who are using these boots to protect African wildlife from poachers. So make sure you're on that limited edition email list and get ready for the drop of the Barefoot African Troopers on June 27th. So check it out below. So now I'll start going through the claims, starting with the first one. That's breathable fly mesh, moisture wicking mesh lining for maximum airflow and breathability to prevent stinky and sweaty feet. And fly mesh is clearly an attempt to connect it to Nike's fly knit. So not a great sign, especially for an indestructible shoe, because right off the bat, it doesn't make any sense for the majority of jobs that you might want a steel toe work sneaker for. Because yes, they're gonna be breathable, as you can see from the breathability test we ran on it, but also it's such an open mesh. Like the holes of these are a couple millimeters wide, where wood chips, dirt, metal shavings, anything that you're actually doing for work that you'd want these for, is gonna immediately get to the inside of these shoes and into your socks and eventually into your feet. And maybe some people just need that ultra breathability, but it's far from an indestructible knit upper. But what is this material made from? Well, we put the flame to it to see how it reacted and it melted immediately. So it's pretty clear it's a synthetic material, which also for work, if you're around any kind of spark or open flame, they could literally melt to your feet. They could catch on fire and melt to your feet. So not very indestructible at all, and honestly kind of the opposite. It's probably the most destructible upper that we've ever seen in any work-oriented footwear. And even this material on the back that looks like leather, it kind of looks like leather. It's supposed to look like leather, but it's not even close. We burned this as well, and it's almost just foam, which for an indestructible work boot, not so great of a choice. And it does not look like they're on there very well. So after we cut them in half, I'm gonna try tearing all these panels off to see how indestructible they really are. But what about the next claim with this European steel toe that is made from heavy duty steel to fully protect your toes from crushing and falling objects? And they do say that it is ASTM certified, and usually if you claim that, you have to have them sent in and tested. But do we trust it? Not really. So we want to run our own tests on it. So we ran the steel toe over with the car like they show, and it deformed the steel toe right off the bat, which is surprising to me because I've had my foot run over by a car and it does not hurt as much as you think. And so it makes me a little bit nervous to actually trust these in any way to protect your toes. But to really put it to the test, we threw it on the Project Farm inspired schmeatine, the smashing shoe guillotine. And the first drop immediately dented it. But the carrot toes did survive. Second drop, it smashed it significantly more, but the toes were still technically fine. So I guess it kind of passes, but Not really. I would not trust that at all for my toes. It's basically at the bottom of passable and right on that barrier. But what about maybe the scariest aspect of this shoe that they really emphasize in the marketing and show you how puncture resistant it is by stepping on nails, kicking stuff. And if you notice in the marketing, they're not standing on nails, they're kicking nails over. So they're not even showing you that they're puncture resistant. They're just kind of dancing around that by kicking the side of the nails. And you would assume that there would be something to the outsole that would make them more puncture resistant. But this outsole is just a really cheap and feels like a really thin PVC outsole. It's not rubber, it's not TPU. I'm pretty sure this is just PVC, which is what you see really only in Doc Martens. And Doc Martens are notoriously fast wearing because it's just PVC and it's a really soft rubber. These are a 60 Shore A. So the outsole alone is not gonna stop a nail any better than a regular pair of sneakers. If anything, it's going to be a lot worse than a regular pair of sneakers because it only took 27 pounds to puncture through the outsole. So that's clearly not military grade puncture resistant material. So then what is it? Well, they used to say that it had a Kevlar lasting board, but there's no use of that word Kevlar anymore. And I'm not sure if that's because Kevlar is a name brand or if they just stopped using Kevlar type material in the lasting board. But looking at it, it looks pretty similar to the one we cut apart like 3 or 4 years ago. And so you'd hope that that's where the puncture resistance is coming from. And you'd hope that it's at least a normal human's weight or more to puncture through. So we put it on the puncture test and it took 198 pounds to puncture through. So if you're a very average man on the lower side and you happen to be standing on a really dull nail that's really, really thick, you might be okay. But if you're in the 200 plus pound category, these are not gonna be puncture resistant at all. And that's only counting the part of this shoe that has the lasting board that's Kevlar-ish or the whatever military grade puncture resistant material. Because if you miss that board, if you miss on the side, you miss on the back somewhere, it's going straight in your foot with 30 pounds of pressure. Because the insole shape is no different than any other shoe where your toes are gonna be spilling off the side of your foot is. So if you don't hit it exactly on that lasting board, it's going right through your foot. Another simple one you think they'd be able to nail is the flexible. Springy flexible composition helps distribute body weight evenly across feet. And it is definitely flexible and malleable and completely unsupportive in any way and easily punctured in a really cheap thin outsole. The springy and flexible nature is going to do the opposite of what it claims by distributing your weight equally because you're just going to compress and it's going to roll over. It's not going to be supportive in any way. So that's completely off. But one thing that's even more off is the next claim, which is their cushioning midsole. Padded midsole allows for a superior cushioning and roomier toe box for all day comfort. And there's absolutely no midsole. We haven't even cut it in half and I know there's no midsole because it's kind of see-through and I can see the upper being wrapped underneath and I can see that lasting board and I know that the lasting board's there, so there is no midsole. You know, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they were referring to this really, really cheap insole, which is probably as cheap of an insole as you'll ever see in any footwear, you could say that. But also like the shape, they say it's a wide toe box, it's clearly not a wide toe box. And like these, especially for a steel toe, if you're claiming it's a wide toe box and people are expecting that and they need a wide toe box and they get just a typical slightly weaker than average steel toe, it's gonna wreck their feet. It's gonna rub on the pinky toe. And I'm willing to bet over a few wears, you're gonna start feeling the hard edge of that steel toe because it's such a cheap construction. And really the only other thing you could say is that maybe they're considering these columns on the inside cushioning because, you know, that's kind of what Doc Marten claims is their airwear cushioning is just like the columns that you see in basically every single sneaker. But to me, it's just completely misleading and incorrect in every possible way. And then finally, the last claim before we cut them in half is less than 1 pound. Surely these are less than 1 pound, right? Well, it was close. Like you saw the boot information, they're 1 pound, 2 ounces, and these are 10.5, so maybe they're weighing a lot smaller sizes, maybe like 7s. So we'll give it to them. It's close to a pound, but still, if you're gonna claim it's under a pound, better make sure they're under a pound because they're definitely not. So not looking very indestructible at all from the outside. So now let's cut them in half and see really what's what. Okay, we got it cut in half, and I'm very excited to try to rip these apart. So let's see what's inside. Plus the steel toe. That's very deformed. So are there any redeeming qualities on the inside of these Indestructible sneakers at all? Well, the outsole is as thin as 2 millimeters in some spot. The upper is literally just glued on to the outsole, which will probably lead to some pretty solid delamination. And the lining in the toe is just a really cheap, like felted material that you can pull apart by hand. So yeah, very, very indestructible as they claim. So I shouldn't have any problem ripping these apart, right? Well, let's start with this little lace wing here. I'm not even gonna try super hard. I'm gonna try to not even grimace. Oh yeah, that just ripped pretty easily. That little triangle sewing spot did hold up pretty well. Okay, what about the little sewn part here at the heel, this fake leather? That's the worst fake leather of all time. I can't pull it, I have to give it the cross pull. Oh, that was easy. Okay, what about the insole? Can I rip the insole out? Well, it's not glued very well. I'm literally just lightly pulling that glue apart. Okay, that's stronger. So when you just glue it together with really cheap glue, you can literally just rip these apart. And that's not to say that that means it's terrible, because I'm sure there's plenty of other boots that you could, or shoes you could tear apart by hand. But when you claim they're indestructible and you can just rip them apart by hand, clearly not nearly as indestructible as they claimed. And it's about as destructible of a shoe as we ever cut apart. And to me, this is a pretty unethical scam, because $75 is not cheap. And most of their claims are not even remotely true. And if you bought these shoes thinking that they were going to protect you and they had all these features, you're not just out 75 bucks, you could actually hurt yourself in these shoes, because if based off of their marketing and what they show you and what they claim, you might think that you're more protected than you are. Because if you're trusting your equipment to protect you, you're gonna rely on your equipment to protect you. And when it fails so miserably and there's actually no protection and arguably less protection than a really cheap pair of sneakers, you could easily hurt yourself. And it's one thing to sell really cheap, overly marketed products to casual wearers or people that aren't buying them as a piece of equipment, but when you're a brand that is telling people this is a piece of equipment for your job, and they're selling it to the people that can't afford the more expensive footwear, and they're relying on their footwear to make their living, that is real and real scammy. So then how can they get away by claiming these are indestructible shoes by selling them as indestructible shoes? Because they're not technically saying they're indestructible shoes, because the brand itself is called Indestructible Shoes and it's trademarked and copyrighted as that. And so it's just this really dumb marketing strategy to call something one thing and say, well, they're not actually that, that's just the name. And people just infer, rightfully so, that when you say they're indestructible, that they're actually indestructible and not just the name of the brand. And if that's not scammy and gross enough, I don't know what it is. This might be the worst offender of like cheap BS marketing, relying on people, being a parasite on people to sell a really product. This one's up there. It's bad. So thank you guys for supporting these videos. Thank you for supporting the second channel, our handmade leather goods we make here in the shop, the collaborations, all those make this possible. So thank you guys for supporting this and helping us show you what you're actually spending your hard-earned money on. So see ya.